All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and get started. I really thank you guys all for showing up today with us. We have a really fantastic presentation and program for you today. Scott Tappan is going to be our keynote speaker. He's going to be
Yeah.
talking about sales mastery and showing you some elite strategies for skyrocketing profits. Really excited about what we're going to learn today. Before we jump into that, I want to give just a few instructions for everybody and just kind of walk through how our event's going to go today. For one, awesome job, everybody, keeping your cameras on. Thank you for that. Love seeing your faces, making this a much more lively and active webinar. So we'll be keeping the chat active over on the right in the Zoom. If you've got questions, or if you want to add some comments or whatever, please drop them into the chat. Isaac, my business partner over here, or wherever he is on your screen, will be monitoring that. How this is going to work today is we're going to spend about 15-20 minutes. Scott's going to give you this presentation. We're going to listen in on that. I'd like to have everybody mute their mics while he is delivering that presentation. Then we're going to take another 15-20 minutes after that. We have some experts in here for you that have had long, very established and great careers in sales and sales leadership. Okay, our expert panel, if you guys would raise your hands, let us see who's on our panel. Okay, all you guys are going to be part of our conversation about the presentation for about 15-20 minutes after that. Then we're going to open it up for your guys' questions. Everybody who's joining us on the call today, for questions, comments, you guys will get to take part in this conversation. Okay, that's how we're going to run that. Thank you for joining us again. Thank you for muting your mics. Scott, I'm going to let you take it away.
All right. Thank you, Monty. And just going to share my screen. Can everybody see my screen? Okay. All right. Well, again, thanks for your time. Really appreciate you guys attending. This is something that we are doing once a month, and we're on our second one right now, and we've gotten quite a bit of value out of the first one. And this next one, or this particular one, I really hope you guys enjoy it. Not only enjoy it, but get something that you can take away. I'm approaching this with just kind of a sequential, like, what does sales success look like? The interesting thing here is there's a lot of noise, if you will, and what can contribute, or in a good way or positive or negative, to sales. Just being a part of this community, my peers who are on here now from Sales Acceleration, we all have a minimum of 25, some have 30 plus years of executive sales experience. And the interesting thing, when I came on board, I honestly thought, and I've got 35 years, I honestly thought I knew everything about sales until I get put up against these guys. And the interesting thing is we all take our best practices and fine tune about 6 client engagements that we have. Really, it's just kind of the formation of we have 180 advisors in coming up with the best processes and the best way that we can enhance sales. And there are many elements that are going to be within this presentation. The first thing is, what does it look like? Document a good sales strategy, a sales story and or value proposition for your messaging and your differentiators, what separates you. You need a good standard sales process. And then a sales scorecard. I mean, scorecard can mean one of many things. It could be dashboards. It could be just Excel sheets. In this case, I'm applying what is needed in the pipeline to hit the goals and objectives that you may have. And then finally, the right compensation plan is very important. And to me, that's one of the things that almost single-handedly, if I could pick one thing in a small, medium-sized business, that I call on, the compensation plans really do contribute quite a bit. And we want to customize this to fit client and company goals. Just starting off, what are the benefits of having a client-centric sales strategy? Well, you get better understanding from the customers because your messaging, everything is much more clear. A competitive advantage, you know exactly where you stand versus your competition, and you're going to use that to your advantage as well. You'll have clear, obtainable, aggressive yet attainable goals. You'll be efficient resource allocation. You'll know where your boundaries are and what you may need in the certain areas of the business to help bring it up, prop it up. And it's just that's kind of your roadmap, if you will. And this is a roadmap that'll take you to consistent growth. And then the sales strategy should include, obviously, you're going to have a product or service that you're going to offer to your customers, but then segments to target, just knowing exactly all the different personas that are out there, all the different areas, pockets with it, whether it's regionally, nationally, globally. You really need to have a lot of good fine tuning of where you're targeting in your segments, just so you can be successful. Sales guiding principles: who are the ideal customers? What businesses are wanted and should you target? And what is your reputation in the market? And then finally, the value proposition and buyer personas. Can't stress enough importance about that particular topic, and I will spend a little time on that as well. Let's just go right into personas. We don't need to get into all of this, but as you're setting up your sales strategy, you really want to know who your buyers are. I mean, that seems kind of obvious, but what makes them tick? And what I do with a lot of my customers is just really sit down and go over. I mean, you might have 5 different types of buyers depending on how many products or services you have. But in this case, I'm just showing one, the persona of a CEO or an owner of a company. Typically, in my world, and probably most everybody here, it's usually a small or medium-sized business. And you'll want to know exactly the personal traits, what their goals are. And then when you come up with like objections to purchase, these are just, I guess, scenarios that you're kind of guessing, but you get feedback from the sales team, from you if you're selling directly to customers, on exactly what the objections are. And then you can use those objections over time to just sit down and with your sales team. Okay, how do we counter these? How do we handle these? What is the best way of doing it? This is one that's very similar to that I pulled together earlier. And we just found it interesting because we came up with the objections to purchase, and you'll see just a few bullets down. It says, think they can do it all. But then when we're coming up with the pain points, and I see this a lot actually, you'll see this spread too thin. Okay, if that's a pain point, but you think you can do it all, I mean, that's a good counter to that objection. You can just, a lot of this will tie together, but it just gives you clarity as to who you're targeting and what motivates them and how you can educate yourself to be different than the competition to get this particular buyer. And then the value proposition. This is, these last couple slides are just the pure marketing, because marketing and sales, they go hand in hand. They're joined at the hip. A lot of companies, they are like their own little silos, but the value proposition itself is something that once it's completed, you really want to make sure it's in all forms of communication, that it's within your company's DNA. Everybody speaks one voice to the customer and to yourselves. And what this typically includes is, what do you do? What's your product or service? What issues do you address, or what problems do you solve for your clients? And then what separates you from the competition? That in itself, you do see a lot of companies that really do not know what separates them. And it's pretty prevalent when you're listening to them or watching them do a walk around, or maybe it's just sitting down with a customer trying to get them over the finish line. When the customer in the back of their head saying, wow, you guys are a dime a dozen. What makes you different? If you really don't know that, you're going to be challenged. The next slide, I use this as a value proposition for one of my customers. He's a manufacturer here in Michigan. And however, I just call him Acme Manufacturing. Again, you're going to look at what you offer clearly, how you can solve the customer's problems, and what makes your products or services better over the competition. In this case, is Acme Manufacturing offers exceptional precision cutting and machine services, solving intricate design and production challenges through our advanced technology and experienced team. We offer an unprecedented commitment to quality, quick turnaround, and personalized customer service. At the very end, that's what separates them from their competition. And they have that quantified too. Most manufacturing plants, as you can imagine, do have quality down to, some very finite numbers. And that I know for a fact their customer service is good. They do have quick turnaround. And it's not much with the other manufacturers that are in that space with them. It's this particular value proposition that should go into messaging. I mean, elements of this, not the whole thing necessarily, but knowing what your value proposition is, and everybody, like I mentioned earlier, can speak one voice. It's very important. It could go into your website communications or your copy on your website. It can go into brochures, a salesperson scripting. Customer care should know this inside and out for their dialogue with their customers as well. I'm going to shift gears here and get into another very important aspect of sales success. That's going to be the sales pipeline calculation. This is something I know that I do and many of my peers do with sales acceleration, just to get the numbers in their mind, in everybody's mind in the business, and in our case, it's sales. How many qualified leads do you need to encounter for you to hit your end objective? It's a sales pipeline, and it's a process that you go from one stage to the next. Everything must be done in one particular stage before they can advance to the next. And what are the numbers that they need to get their end goal? And I've got that in a spreadsheet here in just 1 minute. But then this is how I personally, and by the way, I do want to say that if anybody has a request that wants to see this after I'm done, I'm more than happy to send it to you. If you just shoot me a message on LinkedIn. There's a chance I could go over on time, or if I'm pushing time, then I might leave a couple of the slides off at the end, and at least you'd have this in its entirety. And I meant to mention that at the beginning. I digress just a little bit, but what is the pipeline required to achieve targeted sales? You're going to need to have a real good grasp on close rates at each stage. Like how many leads, pre-qualified leads, do you need to be converted to opportunities? How many qualified opportunities do you need for that to go to proposals to wins? And then you can see, like, from there, you can look at the average number of meetings that I need to have for me to ultimately get this many qualified leads. And from there, all the way down to the close of whatever product or service you're selling. And this next slide here, I'm not exactly sure. I'm sure you guys can see this pretty well, but I use this to make those input those data points. I typically start about here. This could be one salesperson's objective, and it's $1.2 million. Everywhere there's yellow cells, that's where you actually have input. And if there's any base carryover, or, every business is different, obviously, and some just have annual reoccurring revenue. But in this case, it just might be some deals that are just at the tail end of the deal, or there just might still be some revenue coming in from the prior year's business. But in general, you're working from the top of the funnel down. You got 1.2 million. And then in this cell, you just do what your average transaction price is. In this case, I'm just using a round number, 50,000. Well, if you divide the two out, that's going to come out to 24. I know I need to close 24 deals within a year for me to hit my 1.2 million. But then it gets shaved off as you go down through the actual pipeline. I'm going to need 27 qualified proposals to come into as close as it can to that closed won area. I need 27 because about 90% of those are going to convert. So I need the 27 to get to 24. And from here, you just take this is 60% of qualified opportunities are needed. What percent of opportunities converted to proposals are actually going to go through? And that's 60%. You take that 24 divided by the 60, now you got 44. I need 44 sales qualified opportunities in order to get 27 proposals that'll go to final contract. And then the numbers just keep going up. You take that 44 divided by the 30%, which is the close rate at a sales score, what percent of leads convert to an opportunity. And I take 44% divided by 30%. I need 148 sales qualified leads to get to the sales qualified opportunity stage. You see how this works. In pipeline management, you're going to need a lot more leads and qualified discussions to take place before you actually get to your close rates. And these numbers are very important, something to always keep in front of the salespeople and their quotas. You should tie these to compensation plans. And I will get into some elements of a compensation plan that are important if we have time. That is the pipeline management process. Now, this is just kind of a standard sales process. Every product, every service might have their own sales process, but every company, it's unique to the company. I mean, some of these, I've got arrows going off on tangents, and they just have to take different routes. Some might, go into a demo phase. Some might, just go into, that you have to go back and have a face-to-face. But this is just very straight up, kind of standard. You're going to qualify the lead. You're going to have a discovery meeting. You'll go to proposal quote stage. Then you get into the negotiation or the scope of work contract. And then you'll get the closed one. What we typically do, the sales acceleration advisors, is we take whatever sales process through the input of everybody else that has their hand in revenue, and we'll put this into a CRM, whether it's HubSpot, Pipedrive, Salesforce. All of these will go into the CRM. And in this case, we're really looking at one salesperson, but you do this in aggregate for the company. I need 219 yearly meetings to qualify these leads. And then you have 148 qualified leads per year, which will turn into 44 proposals, 27 contracts, and 24 closed won deals. Each of these stages, if you have them in place, there's no better way of bringing on a brand new salesperson and knowing exactly what they need to do at each step of the game here. And what I will typically do with every single stage, and I just took one stage out as an example, and no need to read all this, but I put in the actual questions salespeople need to be asking, the discovery questions, what the responsibilities are, how the phase is entered. And each one of these might have parameters on it, especially if you got a new salesperson and they're at the proposal stage. Well, they have to upload the proposal itself. They'll have to take notes in the CRM. And if some of these items are not getting done, then they cannot advance to the next stage. And that's just important for consistency. It just, once you have a process in place, that consistency really does impact in a positive way of retaining people and just holding on to people, because it's very systematic. Everybody's doing the same thing. You don't let the rogue salesperson who's your top selling revenue generator to do their own thing and take shortcuts, because that's bad for the overall morale and culture of the company. Putting these operating procedures in place in the CRM, they can pull it up at each stage and see exactly what needs to be uploaded and what needs to be done, what questions need to be asked, is really a good time saver. And so a good way to train new people that are coming on board. And then I do have just, how am I doing on time, Mr. Monty or Isaac?
We're right at it. If whatever you can squeeze in there quick, I'd like to jump into our panel review in about another minute.
Yep, that sounds good. Let's assume everything's come together. You got your messaging. Everyone affiliated and bringing with revenue is consistently using the same process. Dashboards and reporting are all being utilized to hold individuals accountable. And also you've got all the right people in place. Are there any more tools that you can use? And as I mentioned at the very beginning, absolutely. And that's the compensation plans. And the 5 key components to successful comp plans, it's got to be win-win. You never want it to be lopsided either way. If it's a new comp plan, look at them quarterly or at least twice a year, make adjustments as needed. You want to incent the behavior you want, which is going to be the most important KPIs of the company. Got to make it easy to understand. And then you got to strike the appropriate balance between the variable pay and the base salary. And that's the next one. I'll just get into that part of it a little bit here. And that is this 19%. We get these numbers in aggregate again, because we do, this data is compiled from 4,000 customers that have gone through sales acceleration. And we have found the best mix is a 50-50. You got 50% base, 50% commission. And it's just interesting to see that, 54% are really running, their salaries are much higher. It's lopsided. It could be 75% base salary or anything above that 50%. Salespeople get complacent. We know for a fact that 50-50 is the way to go. And then really you just take that variable piece and say you've got 3 objectives that go into the variable piece, weight those out by percent and let them draw away from whatever that money is in the variable bucket. That is it for me. I hope I didn't disappoint you, Manny. I think I got it
Of
within
course not. Thank you.
Maybe you got it within a minute and a half. But anyway.
Fantastic information.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. Okay, we're going to launch into our panel discussion. Panel members, as Isaac said in the chat, you guys know who you are, but I'd like to start things off by asking a question. I'm just kind of going to ask you guys a few questions here that I have that I think the audience would love to hear more about. The first one being, how do you motivate your team when deals fall through or quotas are missed? Can you speak to that as you have worked with different clients? Jim Costello, why don't we start with you? And real quick, I know we're going to be short on time, Jim, so I'll unmute first.
How do you motivate when somebody's not hitting their numbers? Well, the numbers show accountability. If the comp plan's right, if the CRM's right, and everything else is in place, you really just have to let them know that they're human, that they're not always going to hit a home run, and you have to keep grinding away. But motivating somebody who's not performing, it's a difficult thing. And that's why you keep a pipeline full of sales candidates.
Fantastic. Dino, what would you say sales success looks like to you when you're working with companies?
Yeah, that's a good question. Scott outlined a number of things that I would kind of look at for sales success. I typically look to simplify it. Ultimately, sales success to me is consistency. It's all about consistency. It has to be consistency in terms of how you hire, consistency in terms of how your salespeople are going to market, consistency in terms of how they're communicating, how they're pricing. There has to be consistency across the board if you really want consistent revenue growth. That's success to me, is consistency.
Fantastic. Jeff, let me jump over to you. What commission structures and bonuses do you feel like works best to incentivize your sales reps? I know Scott talked a lot about that. Do you have a preferred method that you like to use with clients or something that you feel works really well?
Well, the one thing is to get the buy-in from the sales team, right? A lot of the sales teams that we are involved with, these are smaller sales teams. They're people, they're individuals. It's not the corporate world, whereas essentially you're one of hundreds. These are individuals. And what I like to do is I like to take the sales compensation plan and really break it down and get the buy-in from the sales rep. So for instance, what does it mean to them for a proposal meeting? They should know that number. For every single proposal meeting, if you can start to throw in the numbers, each proposal meeting means that I'm going to make X number of dollars because I know X number of proposal meetings equates to a contract. X number goes into the actual win category. Again, if you could start to break down those numbers, that salesperson can start to see, when I do this activity, again, this activity that we want them to do, what does that activity mean to them from a dollar standpoint at the beginning of the sales process? And then the other thing that you can do is understand these are people. What is it they want? Do they want to buy a new car? Do they want to buy a new home? What does that sales compensation plan ultimately lead towards their dreams? Again, we could put that compensation plan down in a couple pieces of paper, or we can go over it in person. But again, it's the human element that I like to break it down for each of my sales folks that I coach.
That's fantastic. Fantastic input. as I'm asking questions for you guys too, feel free if you want to touch base on some of the other questions that I asked here too as a follow-up, feel free to do that. But Michael, what do you feel like separates the top 20 or top 20% of sales reps from the rest? And what behaviors or qualities stand out with those people?
Yeah, I'm really going to drive straight to the top. Thank you, Monty. That's a really good question. The reason I say it is everyone's wondering how I have sales reps, how do they perform really well? The one thing that I really look at for a sales rep that differentiates themselves is their ability to ask questions and understand the person they're having a conversation with. Your sales reps, if they're honest with themselves, will determine that not everyone they're talking to is the right fit for them or for your company. But through asking the right discovery questions, understanding their why, understanding if they're fit, understanding if you can help them and solve that problem, will be the right customer for you. They're the ones that will give you the best margin. They'll be the best to work with. The challenge is some people really get wrapped into, hey, I got to execute the sale. And they're diving right in and selling before they truly understand. Being able to get salespeople who understand the discovery, understand and being motivated to really get in there and make sure they can help before they start selling is what separates the people that are there from that top really 5 to 10%.
Excellent. Jim, you mind sharing your input on that as well? Have anything you'd like to add?
Absolutely. The top 20% qualify sales opportunities hard. They don't waste time. They find out, can this company, if they're our customer, can they pay their bills? Will this customer, will their employees support our team if we win the business? Do we have enough time to prepare an offer? Are they just shopping around for another number? And the 20%, Michael, and I agree completely. I think you're right on target. They're willing to shake things up. They understand the answers they're getting and they can empathize. Empathy is the biggest thing. They can empathize with the customer, but then they have to have the courage and the confidence to ask hard questions, or they're going to burn their resources, including their time, as well as their company's resources.
Fantastic. Scott, let me ask you this. How hands-on are you with managing individual rep pipelines and forecasts? And what approach do you feel like works best in that?
Yeah, I'm typically very hands-on at the beginning because a lot of the businesses that we go into, heck, they may not even have forecasting for that matter, let alone like a sales process. Pulling together the sales process is usually one of the first steps. I usually go through all the forecasting, which will tie into compensation plans, but the sales process usually happens earlier in the engagement. And yeah, by all means, it's like holding hands, just walk beside them, go through every stage, show them. I mean, it's basically reteaching them or teaching them in general how to use the CRM machine. And basically it's as they're going through it, just point them in the right direction where the standard operating procedures are and really just kind of let them take it from there. It doesn't take long to get them up to speed, but modifying CRM systems can be quite a bit, and usually it's a little bit of training that needs to take place.
Hey, Scott, when you're working with a new client, are the salespeople afraid of scorecards? Do you have to remind them it's not a grade card? It's not something we're going to fire you over if you don't have great numbers, but it's a scorecard to tell us give us a stake in the ground of what you need to do to improve.
Yeah,
that's
how. Absolutely. Yep. It is. A lot of them do get intimidated because they know, that they're being watched, and they basically their behavior gets influenced by whatever shows up on the report. But it's just obviously a good way to manage a company is through the data.
Fantastic. Jeff and Michael, I would love to hear your thoughts about this next question. And it's how do you train sales reps to be better storytellers and make emotional connections with their prospects as opposed to being transactional in their delivery?
Yeah, I was told
Jeff,
once.
why don't you go first?
Yeah, I was told once, don't let some facts get in the way of a good story, right? So again, when you're out there and you're trying to paint a picture, you're not out there saying that my product did this and look all the bells and whistles. What you want to do is you want to break it down, right? When people ask me what I do, I tell them a story. I tell them a story, and that story usually it has a pain point. It's a business owner that can't do forecasting, doesn't know, what their revenue is going to look like, let alone 3 months from now or a year. I come in and I give that owner peace of mind. When I'm done and I've done my job, and you ask what success looks like, success means that when I leave my engagement with my business owner, they're not shaking my hand. They're coming up and giving me a bear hug saying, thanks a lot for helping me fix my sales problem. It helps me be able to essentially pull away from the business and spend more time with my family, right? Again, those are the stories that really impact people's lives. And if you get a salesperson understanding what those business problems are and being able to translate that on the other end, it's going to stick. It's going to be memorable, as opposed to, well, their product has this bells and whistles, and their product does this, and their product's ranked whatever. Tie it home.
Yeah.
Great. Michael.
Echo exactly what Jeff said. I work with a company, and when they had the toolkit there for the sales team to use, they really didn't have any case studies in there or any testimonials. But then we went and started looking at their Google reviews and the amount and the compliments that they got in there. What I ended up doing is sitting down with the marketing person and going through and saying, okay, who is this? And how do we equate back to it? And what we ended up doing is going back and putting the case study. Why did we talk to that person? What was the problem? What was their challenge? How did we solve that? And why was this a benefit to them? And in the end, people can relate to others that are similar to them. And that's what the story was, is they see someone who's like them, who has a problem that's pretty similar to theirs, and they see the light at the other end of the tunnel, that this is going to be able to be something that's going to be successful for them and has the potential to make their life, like Jeff said, either better, has a greater understanding about what they're doing, makes things easier, and then maybe, if they're lucky, balance things out so that they get to be able to get home and spend time with their family.
Fantastic. Dino, I've tailored this just for you, my friend. What sales technologies or tools are on your radar right now? And how do you stay on top of the latest innovations in tech?
Yeah, you don't. Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot there in terms of tools. They change. I mean, thanks to AI, of course, there's new tools. I've spent maybe 10 minutes, a couple minutes every hour refreshing my Windows system, because today Windows 11 is rolling out Copilot, which is basically ChatGPT built into your Windows environment. Not sure if anybody wants that. I'm really looking forward to it, but stuff like that is happening all the time. Google released some things just in the last 10 days similar to that. The best part of this is you take your documents, whether they're on your hard drive in Windows environment or they're in the cloud in a Google environment, and you can begin to ask questions about your information. You've got months and months, a bunch of clients and client information. You have a lot of personal information, documents you've created, regardless of what your role is. Now you have the ability to actually interface with a language model and ask it, hey, what did I learn last week or last year or last month, or with this engagement, what output did I have? You're asking specific questions about your information. It just makes everything much more usable for everybody. That's what I'm looking forward to most right now.
That's really awesome. Okay. We've got about 4 minutes left. So I want to round robin this question. I want each of you guys to take this a shot at answering this question, which is, when taking on a new sales leadership role, what are the first things you focus on to turn around underperforming teams? Scott, I'll start with you.
Thanks, Monty. If I'm taking over a sales team, the first thing I want to do is really get to know everybody and what their talents are, and really make an assessment. Because new sales leaders coming into a position, they have the bad rap of, okay, this guy's going to be hardcore. They're just going to take over and start firing people. And it doesn't need to be that way. And I'm not talking about getting to know them to bond with them. I'm talking about just really making a good, rational assessment as to who everybody is, what they can do, what their potential is. And then from there, make sure that the non-performers have all the tools they need to succeed, and just try to help them as much as possible. If that isn't the case, then possibly there's an exit in there somewhere.
Fantastic. Jeff, why don't you take it?
Sure. I think Jim talked about it earlier about qualification and discovery. And that's what I do is I go in. Again, I'm probably going to hear from someone in leadership on this sales team acts like this and does this. But I go in with kind of a fresh slate, open mind. I go out on sales calls with that person. I go and talk to some of their best customers. I go and talk to some of their customers that maybe don't like them much. And again, I go into it from a really discovery, open-minded mindset to truly understand the landscape. Because again, a lot of times our engagements are into the weeds. They don't really see the big picture. And so, after 3 or 4 weeks of doing this assessments that we talked about in the discovery, then we can start to make some decisions and some understandings. But again, during that period of time, really go in with this complete open mindset and learn as much as possible and get lots of different viewpoints within the organization, not just 2 or 3 data points.
Very good. Michael, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I echo a lot of what Scott and Jeff said. One of the things that I really want to do is understand, what are the goals and the objectives of the leaders and the ownership of the organization? What do they want to do? And what are they putting the building blocks in place, similar to what Scott outlined in his presentation today, for them to accomplish those goals? Sometimes there's a disconnect between leadership and ownership versus the team that's rolling up their sleeves to get things done. And that's where I echo what Jeff said, go in and invest time, not only to see what sales is doing internally with their processes, but how they're engaging and working with the cross-functional teams within organizations to make everybody successful and find a way to win. It's really making sure that those goals at the end of the day are understood and known by everybody in the organization all the way down, and that there's some sound understanding about how we're going to execute to achieve those goals.
Fantastic. Jim, why don't you give us your quick thoughts? Unmute though.
Helping an underperformer perform is a challenge. I hearken back to one of my great clients, Chick-fil-A, known for great service. I met the founder and his son, and I made calls with them on stores, and they would walk in and say, "What do you need from me to do a great job?" And that lowered the barriers. Then they'd say, "What do you enjoy doing? What do you not enjoy doing? What do you think you're great at? What do you think you're not great at? Can we fix that? But let's work on the resources and the training you need to do a great job." We can move forward, because not every salesperson is a hunter and enjoys prospecting. Not every farmer in sales enjoys farming. That someone like new challenges, or maybe they want to be an engineer or a sales administrator. Lots of people are in the wrong spot, and we've got to find that out and then help the ones that are in the right spot do a great job.
That's a great point. Dino, you get to tie a bow on this before we jump into live Q&A.
All right. Well, the gentleman all made great points. I think as you listen to each of them, there's a lot of similarities, and it really speaks to the fact that it could be a number of things within an underperforming organization, the reasons why that is. I find that a lot of times it starts at the top, right? First, you're going to get some clues starting at the top. Typically what I'm doing, and a couple mentioned discoveries and forth, but you really start with kind of that owner, founder. What are we doing here in terms of your organization? What's the vision? Where are we going? Who are we serving? Who are we helping? Like, where is that? Is that there? Is that energy starts there? And if you can get that momentum, build that culture, then you start to, you get the right people stay and the wrong people don't want to be in that culture. If you're driving, if you're all kind of have a vision, you're all pulling in the same direction, that starts to flush a lot of things out. And then, of course, you're doing a lot of those tactical things that we heard about that Scott mentioned in terms of top of funnel, middle funnel, how we doing but it starts with that vision, it starts with that energy, it starts with that culture. If you can build that, you can survive a lot of tactical faults.
Beautiful, beautiful. Okay, everybody, you guys have a huge wealth of brilliance on this call that you can ask questions from and get insight from. Okay, so if you have a question, we've got a couple of them in the chat, but if you have a question, feel free to raise your hand. We'll get you one at a time. Ask anything that you'd have for any of our panel members. Matt, I saw your hand first. Go ahead. And by the way, before you start, Matt, There's some of you that I can't see because your cameras aren't on. If you want to drop a chat or drop your question in the chat or turn your camera on and ask a question, please do so. Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, so I'm going to apologize ahead of time because this may end up taking up all of your time, but I'm like 2 months into the sales side of our recruiting business, specifically in hospitality. Very, very green, obviously eager to learn. That's why I'm here with the wealth of experience. Just any advice you guys can find for me, more for, or give to me more for, I would say more for longevity. I don't want to do like quick wins and, hit a home run and then have one game I play. I want to do this for the rest of my life. So any sort of blanket advice there would be great.
Wow. Well,
Go ahead. Any of our panel members? Go
And
ahead,
Matt,
Jeff or Jim. Sorry.
Well, as Scott discussed the sales process, documenting it, making it standardized and easy to follow for a salesperson to take things step by step. That's important if you want a sustainable pipeline and a sustainable infrastructure. The challenge will be if you're selling different services to different audiences and audiences that might require a different sales process than the other. The sales process can make or break your long-term success. And Scott's points were right on target. You've got to document it, establish it, get it into the CRM, develop the scorecards, and monitor the sales process to make sure everybody's staying on track.
Anybody else like to throw into that?
the only thing I'd say, Matt, is, kind of what the last time I was talking is like, what are you in it for? Who are you serving? What are the problems specifically you love to help solve for? Understands very specifically who you want to serve. I tell companies a lot of time, the misperception is that if you want to scale and grow, you broaden who you market to because you want more business, when in fact you really need to narrow it in. I would start by narrowing it in, get very specific on who you're serving. Hopefully you really love working with those people and helping them with their problems. That is probably all you need.
Yeah. I would say really know who you're helping, right? Understand what your value is that you're delivering, how you help, that you can understand the problem and provide the solution, so that you can move beyond just being a service provider and become a trusted advisor to them. Because a lot of people are really looking for solutions nowadays. And granted, technology's out there that can give you a lot of information, but they can't provide the solution. A really good sales department looks beyond it to understand what the problem is and what the solution is. The only other thing, and I'm going to throw it up there, is make sure you've already subscribed to Scott, because I think he gave you a blueprint in the presentation today on what the one thing I would be looking at is, do I have my foundation in place? And all I would be doing is start taking Scott's slides and do I have this, and check. No, I got to work on this. Check. I need to work on this. Because I think if you can execute what he laid out to you today, you're probably going to have a pretty good leg up versus where a lot of other people are that I engage on an ongoing basis are. So if you haven't reached out, my reco is to have a follow-up with him on this, because I just think his presentation will give it to you.
Thanks, you, Michael. Guys. Okay, we have a couple questions in the chat, but I'm going to let Isaac get to those right after Donna. Why don't you go ahead and unmute and you can ask your question real quick.
Yeah, I'm hoping you can hear me okay. I have a couple questions. We are in the process, we're a startup organization. We're in that investor process and funding. We've connected with some companies who will be our customers. What is the recommendation when you're in a startup? Is it to build one? Do I bring on, hire a VP of sales, or do I, because our CEO does sales, that's his background, but that's not a good use of his time, although he will get them started. But do I bring on a fractional person to help build that? Do I outsource that? We're very, very industry specific, and I would need to build a sales team around that industry. Is that something that I can outsource, or is that something that I hire a company to a recruiter to build that sales team?
Yeah. Monty, do you mind if I jump in on this? I'm Don.
Yeah, real quick.
With a startup over the summer, and we went down the decision tree, and it came back to what was the funding and where was the return on investment that was needed. And the reason that we say that is when you bring on a new vice president of sales, they're going to need to set the foundation in place, similar to what we talked about today. Or is that somewhere where you can do it with a fractional person, such as one of ourselves, that's going to be able to help you build that foundation out. That's going to allow you, when your full-time hire comes on board, to hit the ground running, to begin to get the return on investment that you're looking for. It's pretty situational dependent on how quickly you need to make that return on investment. What your investors at what stage are you at? Do you mind if I ask, are you at Series A or B?
We're at A, but we're really close to hitting A. We've got some substantial investors that are just going to give us the bulk of the money.
Okay.
Then it would be getting to the customers, because it takes about 12 months to build
Yeah.
the plant.
Then it would be where do you move that to and then go from there? It's all where that return needs to be and where that's at. If you have that investment, set the foundation in place and get that sales leader up and running as quickly as possible.
Okay, thank you.
And I do
we've
think
got a
that-
couple.
Nope, that's okay.
We've got a couple more questions. I want to make sure we get to Marshall's. He had put these in the chat. So he asked, what is a good close rate? And his second question is, can you talk about the process for qualifying leads? So Scott, you started. Jeff, I'm going to let you. Scott, why don't you take the first one? Jeff, you take the second.
Yeah, as far as what is a good close rate, boy, that's a very high level question, and it depends on the service or product. I just happen to know what your service is, but as far as your industry, the main thing is the close rate's going to get better the more discovery questions that you ask. Part of that's going to be budget. What do you currently have going on right now? What are your current pain points? And if you get all those, that's just going to increase the close rate. Hate to give a vague answer, but it really does depend on an awful lot to go into that equation.
And Jeff, your process for qualifying.
A process for qualified, again, the close rate, like you said, that's hit or miss. It definitely should be more than 10%. I had a recent engagement where they were only getting 10% to close, which is really pathetic. But again, it's all earlier in the process, right? Again, go back to qualified. When you take a sales qualified lead and on the presentation, it talks about a sales opportunity, right? You take it from an SQL and you create a sales opportunity lead, right? What are the buying criteria that you have to go through that you need to see before you promote it? And then from there, before you even do a proposal, what do you need to see before you promote that? This way, if you have those early on, you don't mistake just activity as productivity, right? A lot of times, it's a numbers game. Well, yeah, maybe it's a numbers game, but again, it needs to be a numbers game with some intelligence behind it.
Fantastic.
Hey, Monty, can I give a number?
Please, go ahead.
I only because these guys are right. It's hard to give a number because is it inbound? Is it outbound? Is it a service? Is it a product? There's much. However, the one number that I do keep in mind is a win rate. And that is when you send your proposal out, you should be close to 50% in a lot of cases. If you can keep that right at 50%, then you're not sending out too many proposals or too few is how I'd look at it.
Good deal. All right, Isaac, I know you had a question. It better not be why is your head of sales not closing enough deals?
No, so
We'll go with you.
we know a lot of business owners and their friends. They're like, we're friends with them. And I'll say this honestly, it's like they reach a point where they are stressed out and they go, I've been the best closer. I'm tired. I can't do it anymore. And then they want to take that and give it to someone else, but then they keep they won't let go. I would like to know if for the business owners, the founders who have been historically the sales leader, if you were just to give straight advice without knowing they're not going to have their feelings hurt, what would you tell that person? This is what you need to make that happen and not be stressful, to not be working overtime. What would you tell that person?
Feel free to launch into that. Anybody that would like to.
If we go back to Scott's sales process, that if you got it documented, we're talking about close rates and anxiety and not letting go. To Jeff's point, every step of the sale increases the close rate. To me, by the time you get to the final stage, whether it's going to be closed, won, or lost, it ought to be 80% or higher. But it's probably 50% in the middle and it's 10% at the front. All that through. But Isaac, you've got a great point there. We ask questions of owners, what's the end game? Are you building this to scale to make a great lifestyle? You want that villa in Tuscany? Or are you trying to develop an exit strategy to make a lot of money? There are different things at play that can change the direction of our recommendations. But often we find the sales or the owner of the company thinks they're the smartest person in the world when it comes to sales, and they won't let go, and they get in their own way. And that's where we go back to having the courage to tell the person, I can help you if you want to be helped, but you've got to listen. I'm not here to make you feel good and to be a buddy. I'm going to tell you that you're getting in your own way, and you've got to trust, you've got to give up, you got to delegate.
And what
Excellent.
I found to build on what Jim said real quick, Isaac, is it's giving confidence and faith to the ownership and the leadership. You know, they feel that they're the best salesperson because they want it done. And what they have a challenge with is when they don't know what's going on. By setting up the process and being able to track it and measure it, it allows everybody to have line of sight as the progress of what's going on. And when there is a challenge, it's not unknown. You know where the challenges are. You know what you need to go in and do a deep diagnostic on to say, okay, this needs to be fixed. Here are the actions that we're going to be able to take to have this move on. Most owners understand there's going to be problems. There's going to be hiccups. There's going to be good days and bad days. But as long as they know that they have the faith that the process is in place, you know, they can continue to move on. And fix if it's not going right. They'll feel good, and they'll, you know, they will eventually step away. But to Jim's point, there are times where you need to get in there and have a conversation. You put a process in place, work the process, don't work the people.
Fantastic. Scott, excellent presentation today. Thank you for the great information. Panel, thank you